the name is that first interface, but then after that, it's more about brand experience. I think that's really the most important thing.
Hello and welcome to Brand Tuned, the only podcast on branding that covers IP, which is intrinsic to business and brands. I'm Shireen Smith, lawyer, brand strategist, and curious business owner, keen to discover the secrets of effective brand building to create a successful business. Chandresh is the founder of Cohesia Group, a venture studio which specializes in creating innovative, scalable ventures based on digital technologies. As Chandresh creates portfolios of company brands, in this episode, I wanted to quiz him about business. The focus of the episode is on the U element of my tuned framework for creating a brand. U stands for understand the market. This is a large subject, obviously, because to have the right business strategy, you need to do research, decide how to position your product relative to competitors, to get really clear on your vision and target customers, all before you launch or adjust a business. So obviously we couldn't discuss all that, but I started by discussing Chandresh's own business journey and how he created his own brand. He explained what a brand means, that it's more than just a logo. Also, that people sometimes choose brands because of what it says about them to be using those brands. And it was insightful hearing his thoughts. We then focused the discussion on business models, what the term means, how people benefit from an understanding of the different components of a business model. Chandresh made some interesting comments about the importance of distinguishing between exploration and learning. So, for example, when you're validating your assumptions, start by validating the problem quite separately from your proposed solution. One of the mistakes that Chandresh observes people making is to build products first. So he had some suggestions about how to approach it in a better way. There's a lot of value here to help any prospective product creator think through their ideas. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Chandresh, welcome to the Brand Tune podcast. Tell us a bit more about your business.
Hi, Shireen. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me. So I am, probably the best way to describe myself is a social entrepreneur, transformation mentor, and impact investor. Mm-hmm. I currently am the founder of Cohesia Venture Studio. We are a venture studio which basically creates new startups. We also help them grow, so we also help them to scale as well. So currently we have a portfolio of ventures in the fintech, event tech, augmented reality, virtual reality, and venture capital areas, amongst other things.
Okay, that's interesting. When did you set this up?
So it's been a journey. Like most entrepreneurs, it's like a roller coaster of a ride. So my background was I started many, many years ago with a consultancy, working as a consultant in an IT consultancy, really working on sort of large scale systems and consulting projects, doing sort of very large scale client projects. I mean, everything from working on oil refinery management systems to building trading systems. So that was quite an experience. I think it's always a good thing to go through something like that and work on a broad cross-section of clients and challenges, and also learning about different methodologies and strategies. I then decided to really set up my own business because I thought it was the right time. And I also saw an opportunity. Things were really starting to take off in terms of the digital space. And, there was an opportunity there to kind of combine the consulting, digital creative and technology. So that's how I really started, by setting up a new breed, I guess, of company. That's where Cohesia originally started. And since then, just to kind of cut a long story short, I've had a number of businesses along the way, some of them technical, some of them non-technical. I've also had some creative businesses. I was the founder of a creative agency, a hybrid creative agency, combining art and architecture and other things. And I've also helped a number of clients really scale and exit their businesses as well. So I've kind of been through quite a number of the kind of business life cycles. So yeah, quite an interesting journey so far.
Okay, so have you had several businesses in one go, or were they sort of one after another?
I have, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend. I have had businesses in parallel. And actually, one of the reasons for creating the venture studio and the venture builder was because I realized that what I enjoy doing was creating businesses. So the best way to do that was to actually create a business that is in the business of, creating new ventures. And the way that that's feasible is by creating each of those businesses as a separate entity and as a separate brand. So they all have their own independent brands and their separate entities, and creating their own management teams. I think that's really the only way that it can be done. It's, unless you're Elon Musk or, somebody like that, it's quite a challenge to be running lots of companies in parallel.
Right. So are they kind of like joint ventures where you help somebody who's got a good idea?
There's been a mixture of different models. Some of them I've founded myself or I've co-founded. There's a couple of others where and my team have an equity stake where we have come in as a strategic partner. There are others where I, again, am a strategic advisor. So there's a bit of a spectrum. I think some of them I'm actually the original founder. And again, that's been quite an interesting journey, learning about the different advantages and disadvantages of doing all of those.
So how did you come up with the name? Is it Cohesia?
It is, that's right.
Yeah.
Cohesia is all about cohesion because one of the things I kind of call myself is the fusion entrepreneur, because I'm always looking for ways to combine things and, the interrelationship between all kinds of things which look as though they're separate. So cohesia was the idea of bringing something together, and cohesion to create something of greater value by bringing lots of different components together.
And did you come up with that name straight away, or has it taken you a while to choose it?
So names are really difficult to choose. And actually finding .com, or not necessarily finding, a good domain that reflects your name is quite a challenge, especially nowadays. It is difficult choosing names, but I think it's worth spending some time on it. I wouldn't necessarily say that you should, be too worried about getting it exactly right, because, one of the things that I really talk about when we're considering brands is that the name is that first interface, but then after that, it's all more about brand experience. I think that's really the most important thing. So the name gets you in front of somebody and gets the attention, but after that, it's really the brand experience.
So did you have help coming up with that name, or did you choose it yourself?
I came up with it myself, actually. I did run it past a number of people. I think that's a good thing to do, because I think our perceptions are all framed in the context of our experience. So what means, one thing to me might mean something completely different to somebody else in a different context. And I think a lot of brands have had a problem with that because, they create a brand based on their background, but in a different industry, that same word or in a different country, that may mean something completely different. So it is, quite a tricky thing to do, and definitely worth, checking with different people from different backgrounds, even different nationalities, to see, whether it aligns, and there's nothing wrong with it.
So, what help did you get to work out your brand? And, can you tell me a bit more about, what do you think a brand is and how did you create your own brand?
Well, I was quite fortunate because I was at the time, um, I was also working with a brand guru, a chap called Ravi Adapurakal, who was a great branding specialist and was running um, an agency and had tremendous experience, building really big brands.
Mm.
Um, and also one of the original members of the team that I took on board had a lot of experience. His name is Siddharth Deshmukh. His background was branding and marketing. So I was quite fortunate in that the kind of discussions we were having about brand were really deep and really thinking about brands not just from a creative perspective, but really about what a brand really means, and what's the sort of underlying definition of a brand and things like that. So those are really interesting discussions, and it's a fascinating topic.
So, you had pretty good experience, obviously, with that. What were you hoping to achieve with your brand then? I mean, can you explain something about your brand? What is it?
I think a brand is about really a promise, and it's about creating um, a perception, and it's about a residue that's left in a person's mind. Now that is more than just the name. It's really the sum of all the association and interactions that a person has, not just with the name or the website, but everything, the
Mm.
service that they receive, the product, all of those. So what we were trying to really do, and I hope we've gone some way towards achieving, is really to achieve a perception about the company, which is more than just the name, but it's actually a perception, a positive perception, and a value perception. So it's really trying to help people understand that a brand is more than just a nice logo. It's really your interaction and your team's interaction with the client. It's how the customer uses the products, what they feel about it. And it's the sum of all those interactions. And what we wanted to do, and hopefully we're succeeding, is to really build a perception that we really care about your business. We want to create value for your business, and build real service-driven culture. And very often people kind of focus on building that within clients, but actually it's probably equally, if not more important, to drill that into the team.
Mm.
Because if you have that perception and that sort of culture built into the team, then that was actually going to drive the experience that the customer receives as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what about intellectual property? Did you protect your name and logo?
We've not done
Really?
done that to a great extent. Obviously, we've done some basic things. You know, Technically, obviously, there's some work involved, and maybe that's something we can talk about, potentially doing further downstream. But no, I mean, we got going. We made sure that obviously there weren't any issues in terms of trademarks, so we just made sure everything was okay and nobody else was using it, so there weren't any issues in that sense. And we did some basic things in terms of making sure that we'd recorded it properly.
That's surprising that you haven't locked down your rights to it, but this is often something I notice in business, because it's the very foundation of the brand. It's a bit like the land on which you are building properties. And if you don't own it and somebody else registers it, it is so expensive to try and argue that you came first. So it just,
Absolutely. Yeah.
to me, it's just one of the costs of business is to register your name, because that's how the brand is known.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, when I'm mentoring people and when we're starting other companies, that's what we do. I think, as I said, it's been a journey, and I've made a lot of mistakes on the way, and that's probably one of them.
Okay, so you help somebody with an idea to work out what would be a good business model. Is that one of the things you do?
Yeah, it's a mixture of things. I mean, we either create our own ventures. So we have a number of ventures which we founded or co-founded, where we see that there's a problem and there's an opportunity. We will then, create really test that out, see, on a small scale, whether that's a viable business, whether, it's going to work, whether it's a problem worth solving. And then if it is, then, we would separate that out as an independent business. So the way we work is, each of those ventures is spun off as a separate entity, as a separate business. So that's why we ending up with a portfolio of businesses. So that's our sort of business model, is not to retain all of them under the same brand. And each of those ventures has their own brand as well, which gives a lot of flexibility, because then those brands are very focused on the value proposition that they are working on. They have their own management teams and resources as well, but they also share some infrastructure, and they share some common resources as well, so they get the benefits of both worlds.
So you're a bit like a Procter and Gamble, except that they create product brands, but you're creating kind of separate businesses.
Company brands. Yes, exactly.
But all within a certain space that you understand. Is that right?
Yes, almost all of them have been in some form tech-enabled businesses. I won't say technology businesses, because that means something different, but technology-enabled businesses where there's some element of technology involved. And now, to be honest, I mean, almost every single business has an element of technology that's involved. So that's quite a broad spectrum. But yeah, definitely they tend to fall into businesses that have the ability to leverage exponential technologies.
So do you get people coming to you and pitching to you to invest in them, or?
All the time.
Really?
All the time. So one of the companies I'm a co-founder of is a company called EPIC, Exponential Positive Impact Capital, which is a platform for connecting impact-driven ventures with impact investors. And it's slightly different from the normal investment platform in that it uses a new form of investment called revenue-based finance, where we don't take equity, so it's non-dilutive. So it's a different new form of providing investment, and also we're focused very much on impact investment. So we're only investing in organizations that are creating positive impact. So that's quite an interesting new venture that I'm involved with.
So when you created this agency, you said you also are involved in a creative agency. How would you look at the business model for that?
They are different, and there are different business models which we can touch on in a few minutes, but each company, there are standard structures for business models. So there are almost sort of standard templates and formats for business models. At that time, which was some years ago, we had a standard agency model. So we were providing our service as a service, and paid service. We were building a community as well, and really helping people to collaborate, helping artists and designers. So we were very community focused as well, and bringing together artists, designers, creatives, digital technologists, people in that space, producers, film producers, all kinds of people. Not just traditional people, but we were also bringing together people like architects, lighting designers. So that whole idea of fusion and bringing people together is what we were doing. And then, bringing those people together to meet specific client requirements. So we were bringing together specialists in a kind of a studio model where we'd bring together various specialists to solve a particular problem. So that was really interesting times. I mean, one of the things we worked on was on the James Bond movie. So we had one of our artists was working on an installation which ended up on one of the James Bond movies. So that was interesting.
Yeah, interesting. So it's very necessary nowadays to create a community for almost any business, do you think? And how do you go about doing that?
Absolutely. I'm always advising people I'm mentoring and, my companies to really build engagement. I think, the future is about brands which are, people will choose brands that are aligned with their values, their identity, and their purpose. Mm. So when we talk about brands, actually brands are things that people choose to really connect with their form of identity. So whatever a person feels is their identity, if you look at the brands that they're choosing, there's actually a very good correlation. They're choosing those brands because they're reinforcing that person's identity. Increasingly, what I've also seen is that people are choosing brands because they align with that person's values, and that's becoming a lot more widespread now as well. People are really choosing brands because of their values and the purpose. So definitely, connecting a brand with a community is absolutely critical. Letting your customers be the most effective promoters is the best form of marketing, rather than going out doing it, actually letting your customers be the promoters is one of the most effective ways of building a company.
So could you talk me through how you decide on a business model for a business? Do you have a case study maybe that you could?
Let me maybe talk about what a business model is. So
yeah, that sounds good.
I think there's different people have different definitions, and maybe different people have different experiences. So in simple terms, it's how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value. So putting that even simpler terms, it's basically how are you going to create products and sell them to make money. So it's a very, very simple concept, which strangely enough, still people don't really seem to understand. They think, oh, well, here's a product and that's it. But actually it's about how are you going to create it, how are you going to deliver it, and how are you going to, create value, and make money from it. And there's a lot of misunderstanding in terms of people really not understanding the different components of a business model. And there are various tools out there that people can use. There's something called a business model canvas.
The book,
so that's one tool. But really, it's really about understanding what is the value proposition. So in simple terms, people pay for you to solve a problem or, to create value. And the more people understand, the concept of value, because people pay for value, that's how you create value. And also there's another concept that people get confused with, and that's leverage. Value is creating something that people want and are willing to pay for. And then scaling that is what we mean by leverage. Very often people mix those two up and they start leveraging because marketing is leverage. But if you haven't shown value, then doing all the marketing in the world isn't going to help you because you haven't proven value. So that's a common misconception. Prove value first in the simplest way. Prove that you can create a scalable, repeatable business model, that where people are willing to pay for the value that you're creating. Then show that it's repeatable. Make sure that it's something that isn't just your friends and family are buying because they like you, and your mother says it's the best idea that she ever heard because obviously she's your mother. And then moving on to leveraging the different components of a business model are the value proposition, understanding the customer segments, so understanding which customers and which segments they are.
Mm-hmm.
Thirdly, it's the revenue stream. So where is your revenue going to come from? Being really clear and how that connects with your value proposition and your customer segments. And then your cost base. So what are the core elements of your cost base to deliver that value? And then the route to market, how are you going to deliver it? The products and the services. So what is the route to market or the channels? Those are really just the core of a business model. And if you understand even just those 5 points, then that's a huge step forwards, and that's more than many people seem to do when they start.
Yeah, it's a vast field to just understand the customer segments, and then also, how should you charge for something? Can you be a subscription model? Or, presumably that all these considerations go into deciding what the business model should be.
They do. And as you quite rightly say, I mean, there are different models. So subscription is one, outright purchase is another, there's freemium, so you give something away for free, and then people can pay for the premium aspect of it. Even free, giving something away for free is a business model. I mean, Google, has made multi-trillion-dollar company, from giving free search. But the reality is that they, are in a different, they're making money from somewhere else. They're making it from, the advertising and the data. There are things called multi-sided markets. So these are platform-based business models where you've got buyers and sellers. So something like Amazon, you've got buyers and sellers. So there are a set of standard models and structures. So if people look at the sort of business model books and business model generation, where the business model canvas comes from, some of those are explained in there. But they all have their characteristics. So understanding what business model you have is really important.
Well, often nowadays people just have a set of skills because they want to set up on their own. They might have to set up on their own because big corporations are not hiring so many people. So they've got a set of skills which they then need to use in a business. Do you think there is going to be a difference for them as to how they implement their ideas? I mean, where should they go to for help? Just to work out whether their idea is viable, whether people are going to buy from them, just whether there's value, for example, in what they're going to sell.
Of course, yeah. Really, that whole first stage of a business is exploration and learning. That's really the whole mindset that anyone that is starting a business or starting a new product needs to be in. It's all about creating a value proposition, defining that, but then going out and validating it. It's going out and exploring, understanding what those assumptions are, defining them, and then really going out and trying to validate those assumptions. And the best way of doing that is by going out and talking to potential customers. What I like to do personally, what I tell people to do at a very early stage is to do it in 2 stages. One is to validate the problem independent of the solution, and then go and validate the solution. So let me just explain that. Very often people go to potential clients and go, well, here's a solution, do you like it? And that, I think, should be the second stage. The first stage should be confirming the problem, even not even talking about a solution, going and saying, well, do you have this problem? Is it a problem that, you know, is worth solving? You know, is this a problem that you would pay money to solve? You know, because it has to be something that is worth solving, that they really see as an urgent problem and has value for them to solve first.
Mm.
And at that stage, you're not selling anything, you know, and it's quite refreshing when you talk to clients like that. You get some incredible feedback. You know, you're just there to listen and learn. And then as a second stage, you know, you can go and show them something. And again, you know, one of the mistakes I'm sure you've seen as well is that people start building products and then they go and take them. Customers don't buy products, you know, they are buying a solution. So really showing how you're going to solve that solution can be done in really simple ways. And sometimes it's just a mock-up, you know, to show this is how we're going to do it, and getting customer feedback, potential customer feedback. It could just be by, you know, doing a PowerPoint, you know, doing some simple mock-ups, you know, anything which is the simplest, fastest, cheapest way of validating the value proposition is what I'd recommend.
So you'd create something and then go and speak to potential customers who might buy it, but just see if you can create enough interest in them.
Absolutely, yeah. Because once they've confirmed that they agree that, you know, that problem is worth solving and it's, you know, they would be willing to pay for it, then it's about showing them a solution and whether they agree that whether that solution is going to solve that problem. And rather than create, you know, that whole application or whatever, you know, product, showing them, you know, that product and what we call an MVP, you know, the minimum viable product, which is the small, you know, fastest, cheapest, simplest thing that you can do to validate your assumptions. And that might just be, you know, a click-through PowerPoint presentation. It might be some mock-ups. It might be, you know, what we've done sometimes is to create almost mock-up applications on the mobile phone, you know, using simple HTML. You know, some people get very creative. You can use 3D printing to mock up physical products, all kinds of things, you know. So really creating something which allows you to validate your assumptions as early as possible will save people a lot of money.
But it's still quite difficult, even if you know that there's a problem and that some people are willing to pay for it. It's still quite challenging to actually find out how to position it, how to sell it, what to create.
It is. And being clear on the sort of the business model and your customer segments is really important. So as part of your customer segmentation, I mean, and your strategy, one of the key things you need to understand is who are your primary customers. And a lot of people say, well, yeah, you know, we target everyone and it's, you know, anyone can buy this, which, you know, in the long run might be true, but actually there will be one or two core customer segments which will account for 80% of the revenue. So let me give you a way of thinking which might help people. So, and it's a great illustration that I saw. If you think about if you want to create a 100 million annual revenue business, then there's different ways of achieving that. You know, there's not one route to do that. So if your goal is to create a 100 million pound revenue business, you need to decide which kinds of animals, and this is kind of the analogies in terms of animals, you need to decide which kinds of animals you are going to be hunting. So you can be hunting lots of very small animals like flies or mice or rabbits, or slightly larger ones, medium ones like deer, or maybe even larger ones like elephants, or the really big ones like whales. So if you have an average customer revenue of, say, £100 per year, so that's at the kind of mice level, you need 100 million paying customers, basically. Oh, sorry, you need 1 million customers, paying customers, to make that 100 million. And to get that 1 million paying customers, you might need 10 to 20 million customers to try out your product. If you are targeting the larger accounts, say the kind of corporate level accounts, which are kind of the elephants, where the account value is 100,000 per year,
Mm-hmm.
then you only need 1,000 enterprise customers. So the strategy on how you reach them and how you sell to them and what kind of organization you need is completely different, to build, 10 million paying customers or 1 million paying customers, and to build that kind of traction. It's a completely different marketing strategy to getting 1,000 enterprise customers and managing, £100,000 accounts.
So it goes to knowing where you want to go.
Yeah, and who you're trying to target. It's really understanding who you're trying to target. And actually a lot of it's then logical, because if you are targeting £100,000 customers, you need a good sales team. They're not going to buy that off a website. You need to have certain things in place. You need to do things differently. Whereas if you're going for mass market, then you probably want to be looking at influencers and online engagement and promotions and things like that. So very, very different strategies, both in terms of brand building and marketing.
Yeah, I find actually businesses are often overwhelmed in knowing what to do when they read up about it. And they therefore think, okay, they need a logo, a website, and they turn to branding, hoping that they can get everything they need sorted. And actually what they need is to sort out their business first before turning to branding. Do you think so?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I'd agree. I mean, people think it's just about throwing money at marketing, but it's not. It's really understanding your value proposition, being really clear, and also one of the key things is differentiation. What is the uniqueness? Why are you different from competition? How can you create? Ideally, you want a 10 times better solution. How can you create that massive differentiation from your competition? And also, how can you create the barriers to entry? So I think there's a whole set of thinking that people should be doing to do that.
Well, that's where IP comes in, really, because it's about how you manage competition. So much copying happens. The minute somebody is successful, other businesses are going to pile in and start copying. And so there's some things you can't protect and some that you can. And so understanding, for example, how much to reveal about your ideas, what to keep to yourself, all that needs a strategy as well, before you turn to branding, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, that is one of those differentiators. If you have a product or some creative or something, even a methodology, which is unique to yourself. So in service-oriented businesses, they're notoriously difficult to have IP. But what I have seen people do is create even a service-based methodology, which is unique to that company, and brand that.
Yeah.
So we created something for ourselves, and I know a lot of other consultancies and creative agencies do similar things where they will have their unique methodology and way of doing things, and that has that's branded and can be protected. So yeah, very important to have a unique way of delivering value, and that helps you stand out from the crowd, and a great way of being able to have that barrier to entry and create what I call the X factor to differentiate yourself from other things.
Very interesting. So is there a brand that you particularly admire, Chandresh, before we finish?
It's a tricky question, because there are different brands that I admire for different reasons. I think there are some brands which have great products. There are some which are great creatively. There are some that have achieved amazing things. So maybe I'll mention a couple of examples and tell you what I like about them. Microsoft is actually a really interesting one because Microsoft is a big company, and big companies, to change their brand is a bit like an oil tanker trying to change direction. And they had a specific type of perception, client perception. And over the years, and especially with the new leadership, I think they're actually starting to turn that around. So I'm really watching them with a lot of interest, because some of the new things that they are coming up with are very creative. The way that they're working is really interesting. Some of the investments they're making, and even just the way people are talking about them is changing, and the perception of them, with their new products and services. So I think that's an incredible challenge if you're a big corporate, to change, people's perception of you is much, much harder than a small startup, because, that's a lot easier. The other one, I guess, is an obvious one, is probably more personal brand, and he's got various company brands, is Elon Musk. And obviously his various brands. And maybe I should talk about the brand triangle. I don't know if you've
brand what?
Brand triangle.
Triangle, no.
So I don't know if you've covered this in previous podcasts, but the way I approach it is that I tell people that there are 3 types of brand definitions that they can work on. One is a company brand.
Oh, yes, yeah.
The other is a personal brand. And the third is a product brand. And understanding the differences and what they're for is really important. So for example, Elon Musk is a personal brand. Tesla is a company brand, and the Roadster might be a product brand. So that's really interesting. A few other brands, I guess. I think Peloton has actually done incredibly well recently. So to create a premium brand is very difficult. And they seem to have managed to do that, and are doing brand expansion.
What are they called?
Peloton.
Peloton. Oh, right. Yes, they're doing pretty well.
And they've built up incredible traction and perception. They become the go-to brand. I think that's when you recognize when a brand is doing well. It's where a brand occupies a position in somebody's brain, and takes up a space that, is hard to move. It kind of occupies that space. It becomes the premium brand. I mean, Peloton has become the premium brand for, exercise equipment. And
yes, it's created its own category, a bit
absolutely.
like Cirque du Soleil,
exactly.
a circus without animals.
Yes. And that, that again comes from, I don't know if you're familiar with, but Blue Ocean strategy.
Yes, I've read that.
So there's a methodology that people can use to look at what other people are doing, and create, different forms of value innovation to differentiate themselves, and almost get out of what's called the red ocean, where everyone else is fighting it out, and create a new category, which is really powerful way of positioning a brand.
Great. Thank you very much, Chandresh. It's been really useful, this episode.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
That's it for this week. Do subscribe to the Brand Tuned newsletter to get weekly updates. I'd also love to get your feedback. Just send me an email to info@brandtune.com. Finally, if you liked the episode, please do share it with your friends and colleagues, and review it on iTunes or whichever platform you use to listen to podcasts. If you leave us a 5-star review, it means more people will listen and we can spread the word much more quickly about the podcast. Thank you, and bye for now.